All right, well, welcome everybody. I'm glad you could be here for what I guess we would call our graduation group call, and congratulations to you all for being pet loss specialists. I know we still have a little bit of grading to do of the final exams, but I'd say Connie, we're pretty pleased with what we saw in them. So hopefully it wasn't too daunting to do them, but we were pretty pleased with what we saw. So for this group call, and we actually got some good questions in, and surprisingly, hold on, I just want to make sure this isn't from one of you. Hold on. Oh no, okay. All right. What I want to do in this call, though, is I want to go over what happens now, and then answer any questions that were submitted or questions that you may have, and then any questions that come up from what we talk about. So what happens now? So like I said, we still do have a little bit of grading to do. I'd say in the next few days that'll all be graded. Once that's done, we'll begin to get together the information we need to do your certificate. So you'll be getting an electronic certificate, and you'll be getting an in-person, a hard copy certificate. No, I'm not going to come to your house and hand you your certificate. Can't do that, but I can mail it to you. So the reason we do the electronic certificates is invariably some get lost by mail, and we want you to at least have something. Also the in-person I don't know, where is that in-person coming from? The hard copy certificates have to be printed, the envelopes have to be done. So I'm going to say that by the 24th, you should have your electronic certificate and email that'll come. By the 28th, we should be mailing out, and it depends on the printer, of course, but generally they're pretty good, but we should be mailing out the hard copy certificates on the 28th. For those of you who are interested or need the race credits, there's a little, and if any of you have dealt with race or CE broker, you know that things are always changing with them. And so we have to get a couple of things cleared up on, because their procedures are always changing on their end. But probably on the 24th, that'll be submitted to them. You will need to submit information to me, and I'll be sending out, when you get your electronic certificates, there's going to be a little paragraph, because it comes with an email too, that'll give you the procedure that you need to follow if you do want the race credit. So that's a little bit about that. Now, in terms of, I know some of you are interested in volunteering for or mentoring with the chat rooms and the support groups. There'll be more information going out about that, but again, that'll be more toward the end of the month. I will also tell you that I want to say personally that I appreciate your patience. I know we had to postpone the start of the course for the week, and then postpone one of the webinars due to this whole move and me getting sick and being in the hospital and stuff. So because of that, I am going to offer each of you an extra 30-minute consult that you can use to talk about whatever you want to talk about. Now, obviously, this is going to have to be carefully scheduled, because my schedule continues to be somewhat hectic. Again, when you get your electronic certificate, in that email, there'll be information on how to schedule that. It'll be by Zoom, or if you'd rather do it by telephone, we could do it either way. But I appreciate your patience with the little delays and things that we've had like that. So I wrote down some of the questions, but then a few more questions came in, and so I'm gonna kind of go back and forth, and as usual, you may not see me from time to time as I read a question, but I'm gonna try to put them into topics. If there's something that kind of strikes a chord that you want to ask about with that topic or comment on, again, this group call is for you, so this is your time. So Connie will be monitoring the chat, but you can also use that little hand icon. I don't know where you get that from, but I know it's somewhere. And then, or you could just raise your hand or kind of go, hey, over here, I want to say something. So whatever works best for you, okay? So I guess we'll start out with just kind of a housekeeping kind of item that somebody asked about, and I think it is important. So they just wanted to know, to clarify what you all can share and cannot share with the course, and it's really simple. Obviously, this part of Pet Loss Partners is the income producing part. So we don't want you to share the actual modules, you know, and kind of spread it around your practice or around your vet tech organization. That wouldn't do us any good. So we would ask you not to do that. That being said, things like the quality of life scale of Dr. Villalobos, that little self-care animal handout that we gave you, the pledge from the heart, and there were a couple other things like that. You can feel free to share those with other people. We just ask that you do give Pet Loss Partners credit for them, okay? So it's really, there's nothing super complicated. It's just those two things. Please don't share the webinars or modules, but you could share the actual resource type of thing. If you wanted to share the group guidelines, the pet loss bibliography, any kind of thing like that, you can feel free to share that. Okay. So I hope that makes that part of it easier. So I guess that the next set of questions actually kind of is more module 9 compassion fatigue type of information. So we're gonna go through that first. So let's see, it says, how would I learn more on compassion fatigue? I'm in the veterinary field and I'd like to be able to support others as well. Do you think it's a good idea? Have you seen anyone in the veterinary field do this on top of the work they're already doing? There are courses that you can take. I took Charles Figley's course through Greenleaf or something. I don't know that he does it anymore, but Charles Figley really is, I always say, kind of like the can't think of the word, but almost like the Mother Teresa of compassion fatigue, you know, like, you know, he really is the guy that you would want to go to, especially when in terms of compassion fatigue and animal caregivers. And he wrote a wonderful book years ago called Compassion Fatigue in the Animal Care Community. It was written a long time ago, but truly I think it's the best book out there. So I would start out with that book. In terms of, and we actually did, off the top of my head, I could think of one person, well, two people, okay, that I know kind of got a little bit involved in you know, offering compassion fatigue support, who are in the veterinary field. And let me say this, so, you know, I really kind of fell into it without meaning to get into it at all. And so how I started doing it, and I think I shared this with you, is I was going into practices, and so my backstory is my doctorate's in organizational psychology, which is kind of dealing with business climates and kind of doing some mentoring and counseling almost in the business field, right? And I started to notice that, and I think you heard me use this term, that I would walk into a practice and they would almost have like a staph infection of compassion fatigue, right? You could just feel that heaviness. And so that's what got my interest in it. I read the Figley book, I took his course, and it kind of was a snowball effect from there. If you're in that setting, you've got a little bit of an idea of what it is and what it could do and how it could affect you all. Yeah, I just saw that about PESI. I know they have different courses. I think they even have a course on pet loss, but my only personal, I guess, feeling about PESI is when it comes to certain topics, right, like pet loss support, compassion fatigue, I believe there has to be a little bit more one-on-one involvement. And I think all their courses, like, you just read things and take a quiz and you're supposed to be able to do this. So I always have a little bit of an issue with those types of courses where you're not at least interacting with somebody at some point. So I would say kind of be careful with that. But let me share a little bit about, so on the good side, there was a vet tech who had an interest in it, took our course, had an interest in it, and I believe she took the Figley course. This was probably 2 years ago, I guess. And she took it to kind of just offer support to her individual, like, practice, right? Or to give, I guess, information more to the practice manager so that they could find resources for their staff. On the opposite side, there was actually a veterinarian interested in learning more about it, and I believe she might have even owned or been part owner of the practice, and also took some course or read something and felt like she wanted to be this person who was going to help a lot of people in her area. And within, I'm going to say, like, she probably reached out to me about 3 or 4 months after getting the information. It was like, forget it, I can't do this. It's like, and her reason that she said for doing it was this. She said she was so wrapped up in trying to manage her own compassion fatigue and that of her practice and her staff. And it was just getting too heavy for her to try to help other people and still be a veterinarian and still be a practice owner. So it became a little bit too much for her. So that's a couple of examples. I think maybe if you're in the mental health field and you had a strong interest in it and wanted to add onto what you were doing, I would definitely take a course. However, before I started getting really involved in it, I would probably try to go into some practices, or at least have some real, I guess, practicum knowledge of what it's really like and what really goes on with veterinary practices. It's very easy, again, and that's why we designed the course the way we did, and why I'm kind of like not against, but leery of just reading and then saying you can do something without really kind of experiencing it and kind of getting your feet wet. That's why we have you do the interviews we have you do. We really want you to see what it's like to to talk to somebody who has lost a pet. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts or comments about any of that? No, nothing? Okay. This also has to do with compassion fatigue, and it asks me, the question is, can you clarify what you mean when you talk about managing versus combating compassion fatigue? And how do you know the difference, and when is it too much? And I always go back to, and in the beginning, when I first started doing this work, I used to talk a lot about combating compassion fatigue, right? That being said, I read a couple of other books, read a couple of other articles, and I should have, I don't know if I could find it really quick. Hold on. I should have found this slide before, but let me see if I could find it really quick. Where would it be? Oh, maybe here, actually. Yes, here it is. Wow. Okay. So I'm going to come back here. And I'm going to share the screen because I really think this says it all. And it's this by Naomi Remen. She wrote, "The expectation that we can be immersed in suffering and loss daily and not be touched by it is as unrealistic as expecting to be able to walk through water without getting wet." That's the way I see compassion fatigue. We're just talking, I'm a baseball fan, right? And so we're talking about minor league and what, the risks of becoming a major league baseball professional. And there is like a correlation, because when you decide that you want to play professional baseball, you know that you have to build yourself up, right? And the stronger you get, the less likely you are to have a major injury. That being said, and there was actually a statistic I saw, like I said, I'm a baseball fan, and I think it's 85% of all Major League Baseball players will at one point get an injury, because it's just the nature of the game, right? And that's what I'm talking about with compassion fatigue. You're working in a profession where you are seeing kind of suffering and loss on a daily basis. So what makes us think that at some point we're not going to get affected by it? We're human. Sometimes we get worn down. Sometimes we get tired. So the key is not to say, I'm not going to be affected by it. I think actually your level of burnout will most likely increase if you go in with that kind of attitude. But if you kind of go in and say, this is just a hazard of the job, this is part of the job. So what can I do so I don't get to that point of burnout? Well, I could have a good individual self-care plan. I could have a self-care buddy. I could have good boundaries. I could. So that's what I'm talking about. I hope that clarifies it. That's my own personal opinion. I know a lot of us, a lot of my colleagues also kind of feel the same way, that it's going to happen. As a pet loss specialist, you are going to get tired. There's going to be days where it's like, I can't talk to one more person. When I was going through the move and everything, it was like, my kettle was pretty empty. So it's important to take care of yourself. Any thoughts, questions? Is everybody just really summered out and you guys are kind of quiet today? I'll be that teacher. Come on, if you have a question, if you have it, somebody else does too.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, well, I'll keep on going then. Let's see. I think there might have been one other question about that. Hold on one second, because a couple came in after. Where is it? Okay. I'm just making sure. Oh, here it is. How do you know if and when you're beginning to feel the effects of compassion fatigue? What do you do about it? Have you taken any time off? Well, I think I just shared a little bit about that. But in terms of how do you know? I think for me, and Connie, feel free to jump in after too. You start to notice a difference in yourself. It's not quite the same. You're not the same person. You don't have as much like ability to bounce back after a hard day or but something's different. I guess that's how I know something doesn't feel right. And again, that's where I talk about how important awareness is. Being able to really be mindful and aware. Connie, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, you could be more irritable than normal. That's a sign. Things that didn't used to bother you all of a sudden start to bother you. Like the lady writing a check in front of you at line in the grocery store, and it's
Yeah.
um and yeah, and so you will see these little things. And what is difficult is how do I um tie that to my job? Why am, if I'm irritable, how does my job have anything to do with that? And that's when it really, takes the time to just sit quietly and reflect. And did something happen that day that was particularly bad? Has things been bad for a long time? Because that's what Sandy said. It just builds and builds and builds. And everybody, when they come into a new job or a new practice, you're just bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and everything's wonderful, and then it's just day after day after day after day, and you don't get a reprieve. And so that's why we say self-care, self-care, self-care. Don't let it get to that point. Just, even if you're not thinking you don't have, or you have compassion fatigue, self-care is not a bad thing, even if you don't have compassion. Right? Be your own best friend. Take really good care of yourself so that you don't get compassion fatigue. But yeah, you could tell, like Sandy said, you just do not feel right. Little things irritate you. You're tired. You just cannot bounce back the way that you used to. And you might not even want to go to work.
Yeah. And another thing too is it is like you begin to and I'm a little tired myself today. So but what is you become numb to things, right? So those cute little puppies that you used to love to see, they don't do anything for you.
Other puppy. Oh,
Yeah,
God.
yeah, or you don't get affected at all by any euthanasias, right? Or by any clients. You start becoming numb to it, or you start using something to numb yourself out that may not be the healthiest thing, and I'll leave that thing up to your imagination, but but that could be kind of it too. Any questions or thoughts? Is
This is
anybody?
the best group we've ever had.
I know, and I keep looking and I don't see anybody there, and it's like, are we just talking? Are we really?
I hope they don't, start the meeting and then, go off and go for a
I
walk or come back and we're all back.
I can tell you you're not alone. I'm just on the Arizona border driving back from Phoenix to Los Angeles, and it's kind of hard to talk.
Fine, we're glad you're here.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, let's see. I'm here. Just take it. Okay. Okay. What other? There were a couple other topics that was. Let's see.
Do you want to save this question for later or do you want to answer it now?
What question?
I don't think we have. There's a question in the chat. Have you ever encountered anyone who's taken this course that gets so burnt out that they decide this isn't the right path for them? Is that a course, the path of being a pet loss counselor? Okay. Yeah, Sandy, do you know anybody that's taken this class and gone on to be a pet loss counselor and just couldn't do it anymore?
I know people. We have had people for one reason or another, decide to postpone the course, like not realize, I think, how much work it does take to take the course and how much is involved in being a pet loss specialist. But I don't think we've been doing this since 2019. Well, let me say this. We have gotten people, and I think I mentioned this, who cast a wide net in the beginning and kind of freaked out, calling us, kind of saying, what do? I can't handle all this, or I've kind of said something that I could do something that I can't. And I've kind of walked them back and told them how to backtrack a bit. And we've had people kind of get a little frustrated, honestly, because they thought they took this course and were going to save the world. And it was all going to happen within a period of 3 to 6 months, kind of thing. And as I said, I've been doing this work for 14 years now. For the first, well, I still do a little bit of consulting for my old profession, a little bit. But I would say for the first 10 years, 11 years, I was doing a lot of consulting. I was doing this kind of part-time. A lot of us do that. Some people just do it to volunteer and help. So I think there was some frustration in that sense, but I don't think anybody's really. Connie, do you remember anybody kind of saying, oh, I don't like this, I'm not going to do it, kind of thing?
No, I've had, I go through a pretty heavy rotation of facilitators for my group because they get burned out. But that's a volunteer position. I mean, any volunteer position is rarely longer than, a year or two. So,
Yeah.
But yeah, nobody that's taken the class and has said, I can't do this.
Yeah, so that being said, let me go to this set of questions here. Where it is? Where is it? That's not it. Okay. I wanted to ask, it says each of you, both of you, what is the best advice you can give us from your personal perspective and experience in terms of doing this work?
That's a hard question.
Yeah. I just read it. I copied it. I didn't really look at it. I'm kind of like, I don't know if it's the best advice. And Connie, do you want to go first, or do you just want me to put this out here? And you... I know.
It kind of just depends on what your goals are. If your goal is to become a full-time pet loss counselor, I would say be patient, because your clients, other than, what's your advertising dollars budget, be patient with getting clients. Boy, I don't, I would say, I think my best advice would be to keep learning.
Yes.
Because I just read a book, it's called It's Okay That You're Not Okay. And it has really altered my perception of grief counseling. And so this field, like any field, is constantly evolving. And so, we don't blame things on our mothers anymore. Well, I do. No, but we've gone from Freud to, the whole gamut of grief counseling, and we talked about this early on. It used to be the Kubler-Ross, and then it was stages, and then it was tasks, and we were even moving beyond that. So, find a professional organization, somehow stay involved in the field, and keep learning. I mean, subscribe to journals, that type of thing, any kind of grief, grief institutes or anything like that. Stay up to date, keep learning, because it changes. It's not the same. It's not going to be the same today as it is going to be in a year or 10 years or whatever. It's certainly not the same today as it was years ago. I mean, Sandy and I've talked about the one fellow that we, worked for, that, you had to get better, or you were kicked out of the chat room, and, and he said, we could do the warm fuzzies for a while, but we had to use those CBT techniques, and, and get these people better. And that's not true. That's just not true. We cannot make people better. And so realize that you cannot make someone better. You can walk with them in their pain. You can sit with them. You can bear witness to their grief, but you cannot make them better. So, I mean, yeah, stay informed, stay up to date, stay involved. Don't just go off and open your practice in a vacuum.
Yeah, and I would say, and that's really important, and I guess kind of related to what have just been talking about, is if you take this, you've taken the course, or you start doing the work and it's not for you, then don't do it. Because you're not going to be helping yourself, and you're not going to be helping others. So I think, I've mentioned that I just moved into this 55 plus community. And so there's a good number of people who are older than me. And then there's like a group of us who probably are like 55 to 65. And then there's older people, right? And when I tell people that I'm still working, almost the first thing that comes out of their mouth is, "Oh, I'm sorry." And it's like, no, I really love the work I do. And it's interesting. My best friend, I might have mentioned her a couple of times. She's a teacher, and she has been teaching for enough years that at 55 she could retire, and she's going to. She's financially at a place where she can do that. And I was like, wow, I couldn't even really like think about retiring and not doing anything, right? Because if you live to be now like 85, that's like an awful long time to sit on the porch. You know, I mean, your rocking chair is going to need a lot of WD-40 for that. But no, but what I'm saying is for me, right? And I really mean this. I don't think I ever want to, and I was telling her this, and I think I want to do like some type of support, even if I were won that like $1.5 billion Mega Millions or whatever it was that was out there. I honestly think I'd want to find a way to offer support for as long as I can, because it is a passion for me, and it comes out of, like I said, just being so broken when Maz died. And I'm sure Connie could attest to this too, you know, and I say it all the time, this profession in any given day could be the hardest and most rewarding profession you'll ever be in. You know, so I will tell you, I have right now a client who, single woman with some mental health challenges, and she has been coming to the group for a while. She lost her 21-year-old cat. She's been coming to the group for a couple of years, the last year not as frequently, right? But she came on last week and she was like glowing, and she you know, put this new little 7-year-old cat named Sasha on, and she's like, this is my new cat, Sasha. And this is somebody who is like, I'm done. I've had the best. I had, you know, her cat for 21 years, and I'm at this age where I'm never gonna open myself up to this kind of pain. And she, even the other group members, is like, my goodness, you're glowing. Like that smile, we've never seen that smile. And like I had tears in my eyes, and I was like, oh my gosh. You know, that's why I do this work, to take somebody like that who is, again, so broken and swearing off ever having another pet, and then seeing her come even a couple years later on with this new 7-year-old cat who was returned to the shelter, and in a high kill shelter, and just opening her heart up to love again. So I would say, you know, make sure that you don't have to love it the way I do, but that you still enjoy and you still want to help people. And that's the primary purpose. And it will happen, kind of like we talked about in the marketing module. Sure, you've all seen it. Those people who come to, you know, fix your garbage disposal, and you could tell they just don't give a damn if it doesn't work out, right? Or, you know, like I went into this furniture store looking for stuff, and the lady couldn't care less about trying to help me. There's those kind of people, and then the people, and when you really care, good things happen, opportunities open up. So I guess for me, that's the greatest thing, is like, take care of yourself and keep going, and it'll happen if you do it with the right intentions, right? So there you go. Hopefully those are some things. I didn't realize how hard that question was, and I was like, oh, when I read I was like, I know. Okay, there was something else kind of related to that. Oh, somebody asked about licensing and insurance. Hold on, let me come back to you. So again, if any program tells you that they will provide you with a license, that you're now licensed to do pet loss specialist, run, because they're lying to you. You know? There is no licensing for a pet loss specialist. You are now certified as a pet loss professional specialist through Pet Loss Partners. Pet Loss Partners, is accredited by RICE, which is the, and I always say it wrong, like the American Veterinary Board, what a AASVP or something like that. So we're accredited by them, and we had to go through quite a process to get to this point of offering the course, and we still do have to meet different requirements in order to keep our certification. That's about all you're going to get. You're going to get your certificates from us. You're going to get RACE credits if that's something that you're interested in. But that's about as far as it goes with, as far as you can go with this. So in terms of it,
You get a certificate through the American Academy of Grief Counseling, and I'll put that in the chat. And they've got different types of they do have a pet loss grief counseling, and it's quite a comprehensive class. It's not cheap. I took it years ago. And you do have to, like any certification, you do have to keep renewing it. So it's not just a one and done. So, and then you also have to, you have to have some criteria. So you need to be a registered nurse, a social worker, a counselor, pastoral counselor, a licensed physician. So it has constraints.
Right.
But
still, that is a certification. It's not a licensing.
No, licensing is a lot different.
Yeah. And so, okay. In terms of insurance, again, I think we talked a little bit about this in the marketing part of it. It really depends. I would actually talk to your insurance agent, which is what I did. I just started out with basic liability insurance. And the reason I started out with that is because when I was doing the groups in person at the different facilities that I went into, they want to make sure you have some kind of insurance. So if somebody slips and falls, it kind of is a supplement to what they have. The more and more you start doing individual sessions and groups and stuff, then you may want to consider more comprehensive insurance, but I'm not an insurance person. And so I don't really want to go. You can put it under umbrella insurance. I know. I don't know, Connie, if you have any thoughts on that at all.
Yeah, we have umbrella insurance.
Okay.
Yeah, talk to your agent. You know, I would think would be the start. Good place to start.
And then in terms of like what type of structure for your organization, and again, I wouldn't even think about that until you really were seriously going to do something with it. I mean, if you already have a structure, if you're a licensed a LMFT or you already have something there, but for instance, Pet Loss Partners is an individual LLC, I think, or a sole proprietor LLC, I think they call it. Now, when we become a nonprofit, that'll change again. But again, I'm also not an accountant, just like I'm not an insurance person. So I don't want to kind of steer you wrong. And Connie, if you have some information on that you want to add, but that's what I would think.
Yep.
And again, when you first start doing this work, if you're just doing like a monthly Zoom call, I mean, it's not like I would hold off to see what it becomes before I put a lot of time into what's the word I'm trying to think of, where you really become a formal business structure, I guess is what I'm saying. Yeah. And I think Cindy asked something about, can we market ourselves? Yeah, you can say if you want to put on your business card that you're a certified pet loss specialist. Yes, you can absolutely say that. And again, I will be really, I guess, adamant. You've heard me mention this a few times, but if you're not a mental health professional, please be careful on the way you say things. Number one, do no harm, right? We don't want to pretend we can do something that we can't. And number two, you want to protect yourself. To this day, and I'm 14 years into it, and I have my doctorate in organizational psychology. And so a lot of people say, oh, you're a doctor, Dr. Grossman. Like, one of the first things I say is, I'm not a therapist. I'm not certified with any kind of mental health. I have my doctorate in organizational psychology. If they really ask a lot about what that means, I'll let them know I went up to my master's in clinical and then was like, whoa, so I went a different direction. But like, even when I send a PayPal request out for payment, when it says, what is this for? I will say something like, a 1 hour Zoom session for 1 hour Zoom pet loss session for pet loss purposes only. That's just protecting myself and them as well. Connie, any thoughts on that either? And I know you actually are a little further into the mental health part of it than I am. So
Yeah, no, I think, yeah, you kind of covered it.
okay. Somebody asked about PayPal, and I'm trying to, let me find the question really quick.
I take payment PayPal, Venmo.
Yeah, and so I started out only taking PayPal, then I went to Venmo, and then now I also take Zelle as well.
You
So
need to make it easy for people to pay you.
yes. So Venmo and PayPal do take a fee. In addition, with Venmo and PayPal, if you make over a certain amount of money, and the IRS is like, the IRS, they're gonna get their money one way or another. I think it's now over $600 a year. If you will get a 1099 if you make from PayPal or Venmo, if you make more than $600. So something to keep in mind. Okay. Let me look over here. Oh, okay, interesting. Sorry, I kind of copied these questions without really reading them. And Connie, I definitely want to get your input in this too. What pieces of support / resources do you think it's most important for a practice to have or to do for those who are having to euthanize a pet? I didn't read it before either, so
To give a client who's euthanizing.
yeah, I think they're saying, like, so if somebody comes to you for to have to euthanize their pet, what are the things you want to be sure and do, and what are the things you want to, and if the person's here who wrote that question, I don't copy your names, please feel free to clarify if we're getting it wrong.
Well, and there's a lot of them, and actually I'm putting together a list of resources for the students at the University of Alaska class. I'm putting together a list of resources for them. And so, I think if you're just going to choose a couple, obviously our website, right? You want to have people, you want to have a couple support groups. I would point them towards the PetWorks website, because there's a whole bunch of grief counselors, pet loss grief counselors there. So, just they're not having to just Google a pet loss counselor.
Or petloss.net as well.
Yeah. So there's several good websites that kind of collate counselors by area or whatever. So I would just have, I would just go out and research and just have a couple of good internet resources. And then I always include books, it's okay that you're not okay. We have several books that we recommend. And then aftercare, like pet memorial things, so if somebody wants a blown glass or, things like that. So it doesn't, it just has to be a couple, but yeah. And so if you know somebody that recommends something like that, then put that on your list.
Yeah, and so I think I'm gonna go in a little bit of a different direction, not like arguing that, but I'm gonna go more in like what practice is. Okay, I'm kind of looking at the question and saying,
Did I misunderstand the question?
no, no, but like kind of add on to that. So like what practices would I put into place for people who were at, so at a practice, what practices would I put into, or at a hospital, what would I do? And I think having a bell or a light outside the euthanasia room rather than constantly going in and saying, are you ready yet? Or can we come in yet? Kind of thing. And I'll share some things that and so these things that I'm saying are actually coming from that idea of the compassionate practice that we offer. So, I would say if you could, having a different exit, if it's possible for them to leave out of a different exit. I would say a grief room rather than an exam room, and you don't have to do a lot, right? Rather, you could, if you have those tables that come down off the wall, always keep that table up, right? And maybe put a couple of bean bags there and a simple little area rug with a couple of candles in the room. That could be your grief room. I would say make sure that when you take the pet, you treat that pet with all the respect that it deserves. Make sure, like our friend Ellie, that horrible memory that she still has of her Jake with his head bobbing up and down as the vet tech took him out of the room because the vet tech wasn't supporting his head. To this day, she still remembers it. And oh my God, what is it? Probably at least 15 years, Connie, or even longer, because she had Shayna so long. So to this day, she can go back to that memory. So those are some of the actual practices that I would kind of implement into your hospital. So that's the two sides of it, I guess. Anybody have any questions, any thoughts? Hello. Oh, I, okay. Oh, another interesting one here. is it okay for a vet/vet tech to follow up with a client themselves, even after sending, it looks like sending a card. I kind of tried to write quickly here. So even after sending a card, and then it says in parentheses, it's a pet that or a client that really touched you. Sure. I mean, I think that would mean a lot to a client, you know, again, remembering that if it's one of your colleagues who is not trained in pet loss support, that it's fine to see how they're doing, but they wouldn't want to quote unquote counsel or offer advice. They would want to refer to somebody who could. But and again, it's up to you how far you want to go, even if you are trained and you're a vet and a vet tech, right? But yeah, I think it's fine if there's a client or a pet that really, I think it would really mean a lot. Connie, any thoughts there? Or
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, anything to show that that you care. I think I graded someone's paper who said that the vet had done everything, but it would have been nice to get a call.
yeah.
So, yeah.
You know, I think like again on when we were sharing all those comments with you, for me, the bad comment that stuck with me and still sticks with me is that person who said, we had been with the practice for years, but I felt like when my dog died, we died too. They never bothered to check in with us.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, and again, that's a practice who has lost that client on the business side of it. But how sad for a family to leave, not only having the loss of their pet, but the loss of people who they thought cared about them. I'll never forget, and Connie, you remember Alice Villalobos, right? And some of you may have heard, she's been retired now for several years, but Dr. Alice Villalobos, she actually is the one who wrote the Quality of Life Scale. And she's a veterinary oncologist. She's written many books and things, and actually kind of lecture. Wait, I think you're on mute.
Oh, am I? No.
Yeah.
No.
Now you're not.
Okay. Yeah, and she's a pistol.
She is a pistol. You're right.
Little tiny woman that's just, man.
Yeah. But yeah, and this is the funny thing. She is like, she will tell you how it is, right? And she was very proud of her own knowledge that she had. That being said, with her clients after their pet passed, she would always in a card, she would say to them, please come by, bring some cookies, we'll have coffee together. She always said that to her clients, and her clients remembered her for that. And some of them did. I remember walking in there a couple of times, and she would say, oh, Sandy, this is Mrs. Jones. You know, we had to euthanize her dog a month or so ago. She just wanted to stop in to say hello. How good would that make you feel, that you were welcome and somebody cared enough to come back and say hello, right? Was there anything there, Connie, that I missed, or?
Nope.
Okay. There's something here too. You talked a lot about the anticipatory bereavement client. Would you say that all clients go through those emotions, or what percent would you say actually have that hard a time? I think the majority of them do. Kind of you could, but I'll just say that again, remember, right? And I just had somebody in the group on Saturday say this. And she said, I knew it. I knew when, and her dog was part Great Dane and part Shepherd, and so big, huge dog. She's like, I knew that his lifespan when I got him was probably going to be maybe 10 years if I was lucky. But yet when he was 9 years old and he passed, I couldn't get out of bed. And that's that disconnect, right? That disconnect with our brain and our hearts. We do understand that these babies' lifespan are way too short, right? When is enough time? It's never enough time. I always say maybe if we died in the same moment, because I know especially with these guys, I don't want them to outlive me because they're a handful. And I don't know who could take care of them and who would give her a shot or deal with Jeter's anxiety and stuff. So when is enough time? Yes, I love Great Danes. We had one too, amazing. The Gentle Giants, that's what they're called, right? And they are. I love them.
Don't
So,
know that big.
huh?
I don't know if they're that big.
No, they don't. They really don't. Yeah. I remember that the one we had, Samson, like he hated thunderstorms and he would try to climb into my dad's lap. And it was like, it's just a huge dog. It is so funny. Kind of like Irish wolfhounds, right? Or some of those really, really large breeds. But I guess my point in all that, right, is I don't think we're ever fully prepared. I personally, that's my opinion. We know they don't live as long, and even when you see them getting older, or maybe the kidney disease went from stage 1 to stage 3. We get it, and we're doing the treatment, right? But I don't really think you're ever really fully prepared to lose them. And so I think you do kind of it's shoot the messenger, that slide we had, right? Don't tell me I'm going to lose them. Don't tell me I only have 2 months. No, I don't. Connie, any thoughts on that? Hi, Jeter.
No, not right now.
Okay.
Other than I think people are, I'm in anticipatory bereavement for 5 of my dogs because they're old, so
Yeah.
it hits you harder some days than others, when you see them, stumble or something, that you recognize that, yeah, they're getting older. So it's what's the word I'm looking for? Varying degrees of anticipatory bereavement. I think the people that we see are just having a really tough time. I think most people can weather it okay, depending on support and the veterinarian support and the support that they have around them and their own inner emotional resilience. But yeah, you can be in anticipatory bereavement for years.
Yeah. And I think you make a good point, Connie, right? I mean, it's not, we were giving you in that webinar, like all the bad things that can happen. It's not like every client's gonna go through every one of those things and just be a basket case or be the nastiest person you ever met. No, like Connie said, it's gonna vary and it's probably gonna change. May not be that bad in the beginning, but as it starts getting closer to the end, they may be a little more difficult to deal with.
Yeah, Mako said, and I answered her, do you think, though, doing this work and knowing all that you know, it makes it a touch easier for personal losses? And I said, no, I'm going to be a hot mess when some of mine go. But, thinking about that, yeah, I'll know that what I'm feeling is normal, right? I'll know that I'm not nice cat butt. Just walk right in front of the cat. I know that what I'm, what I'm feeling is normal, but it doesn't make it any less painful. Knowing that, okay, I'm experiencing this, this and that. I know I'll get through it, but it doesn't make any of the pain less.
Yeah, really well said. And I often say to my clients that, like, and Connie said it to me. Like, I may not, you may not see me for a while when this or that happens, and and I always say, I know, I understand. I have 2 seniors living with me now, right? But I can tell you somebody's gonna have to mop me off the floor those first couple of days, I mean, no, I don't think it. Here's the difference, and I always say it. When Maz died, I didn't think I was gonna be able to survive. When when I lost Callie, like 5 years later, and I had started to do this work, it was horrible, and I knew I was gonna go through it, but I also knew I was gonna be able to survive. So I think that's the difference, right? It doesn't take away the pain, but that there's some hope at the end after you've gone through it once. It may be a hell of a long road getting to that hope again. Just because you have the knowledge doesn't mean, but you kind of go, oh, okay, I know this is normal. I know I'm not crazy, right? We get a lot of, am I crazy? I know I'm not crazy. I know I'm grieving.
Yeah. Yeah, you're able to identify the emotions.
Yeah. Oh, was there something I missed again? I see.
Yeah, Andy said, what would you say was your most difficult case and how did you handle it? Ooh, that's a
You
tough
guys are coming up with some.
questions. Come on, give us some softballs.
Good Lord.
Wow. Oh, I don't know. What would you
have a couple maybe that.
I
I know.
hard.
I
I don't know. I think mine was probably the guy that I had to kick out of my group. And now that I look back, although he really was kind of disruptive, and knowing what I know now, with this whole, idea about grieving and, you're not fixing him, you're just, letting him grieve. That was hard. I had to kick somebody out of my group because he was still grieving after 3 years. He had just found us again and he came back and he was talking about grieving after 3 years, and he would kind of commandeer the group, and it was very difficult, and he wrote in a long email, and he made some very good points, that some people cannot be fixed, and which is true, but my focus was on the health of a group, so that a new person wouldn't come in and go, oh my God, this person's been grieving for 3 years, I'm going to grieve for 3 years, and
Yeah.
so that was tough. Yeah, I would say managing some interesting personalities in group have been interesting. I had a fellow that was an ex-LA detective, and he came to group and he really wouldn't talk that much about his cat. He would take notes and ask all the participants questions.
Oh no.
I was like, oh my God. And I held him after group and I said, I really, want to remind you of what our roles are here, and I think it might be making people nervous because, oh well, I'm just used to doing that, and I go, okay, but yeah, and that was because he was a big guy too, you can imagine an LA detective.
Yeah, I would say 2 things. I would say definitely what Connie said, and I think I used this example, this person in one of the webinars where she had lost a dog, little Chihuahua, and I think I might have said that I was concerned about her because she was keeping the dog in the freezer even after a few months, right? And so I knew, and then like she lost within that 3-month period her other little what do they call them?
The appetizer?
Yeah. The like an Italian greyhound or some kind of small, but not as small. And she was going to put that dog in the freezer too. And you know, and I know this is like the Gallus laughter, but I was like, man, I'd hate to like want Haagen-Dazs from that. You know, it's like, oh no. But so she started coming to the group, and again, I'm dating myself here, and now I can't even think of that actress. Is not Greta Garbo. Is it Greta Garbo, the one who used to say, "I want to be alone"?
Oh, yeah, I think it was Greta Garbo, yeah.
Yeah. She started coming, and we were in a library, right, with a big floppy hat, and it was in the evening we did the group, and sunglasses. And she would come in with her husband, and when it was her time to talk, and this only happened like 2 or 3 times, because I had to also kind of fire her from the group. When it came time to, he would say, "No, I'm going to talk for Cassandra. She doesn't want to talk." And again, it was like, so it was part of it. And I think somebody asked, like, have you ever had people who are like too advanced that you can't help them? Yeah, that was one of them, right? And I had to call her and say, I want to make sure you get the help you deserve. And I don't think I could provide that anymore.
Yeah,
And
that's what I did with that fellow, as I said, we appeared to get to the end of our run here, and so I can, let me refer you to, a therapist or whatever, and
yeah, but again, like Connie said, sometimes, especially in that group setting, you have to do what's best for the group. You do. It's not about one person, it's a group. And I know, I remember like a couple of people being in that group and kind of like they kept glancing over at her and like, oh God. The other two that I would say is, one was a very young kitten that had a tragic passing and looked just like Jeter.
uh,
So that one kind of affected me. And I think I've shared with you before. I used to, when I was in LA, and I don't honestly think I'm going to do it again. Maybe for some clients, if I start doing in-person group. I used to do quite a lot of end of life work where I would be with the family as their pet was euthanized, or the person, especially people who didn't have anyone. Yes, as a doula, correct. But I will tell you that I got certified as an end of life pet doula years after I was doing this work. So it's kind of interesting that I was doing this work, and then I found out about the certification, and a lot of the stuff was the same. I learned some, but and I think that was really hard for me. It's, I hate to say it's easier after they've gone, but like when you see a dog or a cat, you're a dog lover, you're a cat lover, and you see the bond and you see the pain. That would stay with me a little bit, some of them, as did this little cat that actually and it survived this, but it didn't live much after. It actually had jumped into a dryer and the people didn't notice it. And it survived. They were able to, but not long term. And it looked just like Jeter. And so I actually, that night, I had a dream about Jeter in a dryer, and so what do I do? That's the thing. Like, what do we do about those things? For me, I talked to, and Connie knows her, so I started Pet Loss Partners with a woman named Ellie, and I like called Ellie the next day crying, I don't think I could do this work anymore. You know, that's like about having that self-care buddy and somebody to talk to. And Connie and I and the people who do the chats, we have that, you know, we have that ability that to talk to each other afterwards, after a tough loss. That's really important. And it goes back to what did we talk about at the beginning of the call? Compassion, fatigue, self-care.
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah.
a
Have
key
somebody to talk
relationship.
to. Yeah, and do the gallows humor, you know. I mean, Sandy and I talk all the time, and we always end up laughing, and it's really good. It's really good for us to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you need that. So it again, it's hard work, right? It's not for everybody and it's hard work,
Yeah.
but it's
Yeah.
also rewarding.
And be aware of your triggers, you know, really be aware of your triggers, because I've had some, you know, just absolutely horrible stories. We have that one gal in chat who lost the kitten to intestinal parasites. Well, why aren't you worming your animals, you know?
Right.
And she was just devastated. And I'm sure those of you in any of the veterinary fields, you know even more than we do about, you know, proper pet health. But, you know, there's some things that you hear that's really, really hard to hear. And yeah, I know every kitten needs to be wormed, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, you know, and I think people get animals and they don't ever take them to the vet. You know, they don't understand vaccines and worming protocols and all of that. So yeah, really be aware of your triggers, and you will find, like Sandy with her, you know, Siamese cat, yeah, twice. And with me it's a husky. And or if somebody has a dog that passed that was, you know, Maggie, or, you know, one of the names. Uh and then you will hear, you know, some just really tragic stories. So like we said, just self-care, 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 you know, just be aware of your triggers, and then know what to do after a client or a group. I just told Sandy the other day, I told her, I'm like, oh, I'm so worried about this new client because she's just had to euthanize her dog after taking care of it for months. It was paralyzed and they had to take care of it for months. And I said, oh my God, we had to do that. And I was getting these Facebook memories of Andy. We just lost him. I was seeing these pictures of him. I was just here, I mean, just almost over the edge of you know, bursting into tears half of the time. And I'm like, okay, pull it together. And we
Yeah.
meet, and I'm like, oh, what was your dog's name? And she goes, it was Rainy. Well, Rainy was the name of a foster puppy that I had. It would be about the same age as this dog. And I'm like, oh my God. And it wasn't, you know, the dog that I fostered, but I was aware of this. And so I was, you know, I had kind of pre-prepared myself to know that I could get, you know, this could be a hard session. And it turned out to be a fine. And I think half of it is you get yourself all wound up about it, and it ends up being fine. But just be aware of all of that. You've got, you know, I always had border collies. Oh no, it's a border collie, you know, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Behavioral use, those are hard. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Andrea said we've had quite a few behavioral euthanasias in the last 2 weeks, and some of those are very hard. Yeah, they are, because physically there's nothing wrong with the animal, and that's the hardest. Yeah, and people feel so guilty.
Yeah,
Just
I actually have a client now who is a vet tech who had to euthanize her 2-year-old boxer pity mix because he basically, and this is a dog she had from when it was a pup, and at about 6 months it started showing some signs, and she spent a ton of money with trainers and behaviorists, and it attacked her dad. Her dad needed 200 stitches in his face, you know, and she said she knew at that point and it was getting worse, right? And I think sometimes we don't, as pet loss specialists, see a lot of clients with that. behavioral euthanasia because there's so much shame too. Like, what did I do wrong? Or I should have done this, or I should, or if like even this young woman was like, my dad had to go through plastic surgery. Maybe I took it too far, but I really thought he was getting better, and behavioral euthanasia. And I think Connie and I use this now. Connie said something to me. You were the one who said, well, just like any organ can get disease, the brain is an organ and it can have a disease. And I shared that with her, and that really made a difference. And I'll
It is
tell you, go ahead. I'm sorry, Connie.
a condition that's always fatal. I mean, it's a fatal disease because you have to euthanize the animal, and it's just terrible. It's incurable. I mean, people can try, they can manage it, but it's just stressful for everyone.
Yeah, and I will tell you too, and this is another part of it, was so, and there are two parts. So we were talking, and at some point something occurred to me, because she was talking a lot about how people were trying to support her and how people were kind of saying she did the right thing and focusing on that. And I asked her at one point, I'm like, has anyone said to you, I'm sorry for your loss? And she's like, no, I honestly don't think anybody said that. And I said, have you stopped and just taken the time to grieve?
Yeah.
And she's like, and she started crying, right? No, I don't. And so I, referred Dr. Wolfeld's book. I sent her some resources, and I suggested that she write a letter to Oliver, right? That was her dog. And I actually got an email back a couple of days ago, because we're supposed to talk this week, and she's like, I don't know if you're gonna want to talk to me because I still haven't written the letter to Oliver yet. And I'm oh my God, it's not mandatory. It's just a suggestion, right? But no, I mean, the whole part of that is, right, there is the shame of having to euthanize, and thinking that I did something wrong, but really allowing those people to grieve. It's loss. It's a loss too. It's a pet that they love.
It is. It's terrible because it's most likely a younger
Yeah.
too, and that makes it even worse. Yeah.
Honey, did we miss anything? I know we started to get.
I don't know. Oh, well, let's see. Annie, did you ever encounter anyone with such horrible grief that you felt they were beyond your expertise? I think we talked about that.
Yeah.
Refer. I haven't. I don't think have had to refer. But yeah, always have those referrals in your hip pocket.
I would say the person, when you were saying that comes to mind, and there's been a few cases of this. That boy, I think I told you, it was the very first boy. He was a young man. He was like in his early 20s. As I get older, everybody gets younger, but um it was his first dog ever. And this is years ago too, where before they said, don't let the dog sit in the, with the window all the way open and stuff. And he did. It was a little Chihuahua, and on a freeway the dog jumped out, and he was able to get the dog, but it didn't survive. He was so traumatized. I did send him to an EMDR therapist. There has been one or two other people. And I think this is actually one of the hardest losses too. A woman lost all 5 pets in a fire. And the fire people wouldn't let her go back in to try to save them, right? So that was really traumatizing. It was traumatizing to me to hear, because like all I could think of was like I would be arrested if it was, like Jeter or something, because I'd be biting him and scratching him and like, let me in, right? Yes. Absolutely. But so I have referred several times to EMDR therapist. So that's really the only, other than the group experiences that we shared with you, that's the only people I have referred is to EMDR therapist. And again, so he started to go to EMDR therapy, but he also continued to come to the group. So it was like we worked together, right? Like the interdisciplinary team that we talked about. Anything else there, Connie? And I'll look to see if we missed any questions here.
Nope, I think we're good. If I missed you, let me know. Yeah. I think we're good.
Okay. I think we got them all here too. Oh, here's one. Hold on one second. Yeah, so here the only one, and I don't think we
This is the jumper.
I don't think we covered this, but it says, as working in a vet practice as a veterinarian or vet tech, I know you talked about that happy girl who came in during the euthanasia and handled it really bad, but when do you start talking to clients about what may happen or what does happen with the euthanasia? How do you help them be prepared? What is the right time? You guys have some really good questions. What I think so. I'll give this example, okay? And I'm not putting the hospital down. This is many years ago. So I guess it was 2007 when Moz passed. He was 17-year-old. You know, I did the surgery, and I did the chemo. And they started with a light chemo, but it started progressing. And he, like I said, by the time he passed, he went from 10 pounds to 4 pounds. And at some point, there was a vet tech said, well, the tumor has shrunk. Well, yeah, but he's only 4 pounds. So the chemo was going to kill him, right? Nobody ever really said to me, maybe, maybe let's stop doing this. And at one point I did say to them, I remember saying this to the doctor, and I didn't know this at the time, but the doctor that I worked with a lot, there were two doctors. There was a oncologist and then a general doctor he was kind of young, and sometimes he was the only one there. I remember saying, I don't know how I'll be able to euthanize. My dad always did that. I remember saying that to him. That was probably a really good time, right? For him to say, let me tell you a little bit. Let me answer some questions, or what are you afraid of? Or something to that effect. I think if you know that it's inevitable, right? If you're going down that slippery slope and you're seeing fear in your clients, or they say something like that, I don't think I could euthanize, or is euthanasia painful, right? We've talked about, I've had clients whose pets were at the end of life say, it's like, I don't think I could do it because it's like a heart attack. They're gonna, and it's like, no, it's not a big boom kind of thing. And that's when you talk about it. It's very, I don't think there's any one answer, but those are kind of some guidelines, is if you're working with somebody and you're going down that slope and it's going to happen, or they seem really afraid or they've never been through it. I don't think there's anything wrong. And Connie, you know, again, any feedback, if they mention to you, you know, or if you ask them, like, have you ever had to euthanize a pet? Or if they mention they've never had a pet at the end of life, or they've never been through a euthanasia, that may be your opening, right? I mean, Connie, what are your thoughts, you know?
No, I agree. Yeah.
So I don't think, I mean, I hope that that gives you some idea, and feel free, anybody, if you want to add on to it or question it, or I don't think there's any one answer. I think it's very individual. I think the point is, right, that to remember that you're supporting both the family and the pet. Yes, as a vet, your primary job has to be to take care of the pet. But in part, in taking care of the pet, you've got to take care of the family because you want to help them make the best decisions, right? We don't want to keep that pet like Maz, you know, he was 4 pounds. How much more weight could he possibly have lost? Right? We don't want to get to that point. So those are some of the guidelines. It's tough. It's very
Yeah. Not easy. It's just hard seeing people in such pain. I mean,
yeah.
yeah. And you know, you're all here because you're empaths, and it's really hard. But you do feel, like we've talked about before, you really feel better when that person says, you know, thanks. I feel a little,
Yeah.
and it doesn't take much. We talked about that either. It really doesn't take much.
Yeah, you know, I know I had to, you know, say this to several of you in the final exam. You know, remember, your job is not to fix them. It's to listen, to validate, to normalize some of this stuff, right? So, okay, I think that is all the questions then. Again, yeah, congratulations, right? You've all done a real good job and have gotten through this. We know at times it hasn't been the easiest, but you did it. So the next step again is let me just look here again. The electronic certificates with the email with a lot of information will go out by the 24th. We asked you to fill out those information sheets with your address. If your address has changed since the beginning of the course, please let us know, because that's the address we're using to send your hard copy of the certificate. Okay. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your Sunday. And we will be in touch. Like I said, I hope it's just the beginning of the relationship. Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thank you, Connie. I'll just ask you to stay for.
You betcha.
Let me shut off the recording.